Okay, be honest. Some part of you kind of thinks you've already seen everything Earth has to offer. Every mountain's been filmed from a drone, every weird deep-sea fish is on some nature doc, and the whole map's filled in so there's no edge of the world left to fall off. You were born too late to explore the planet and too early to explore space, and you've sort of made peace with that. But the people who came before you, actual ancient humans crouched around fires with no clue what a Tuesday was, were not living on the same planet you are. Same rock, completely different world. And the deeper you dig, the weirder it gets. So let's start easy and just look up. Tonight you'll see a few dozen stars and maybe a planet if you get super lucky. Now switch off every light bulb on Earth. And that's what our ancestors had every night, zero light pollution. What they saw was a sky so stuffed with stars it didn't look like dots at all. They saw millions of stars spiraling and swirling. They saw the Milky Way. This wasn't a faint smudge you drive 3 hours to find. It was the brightest thing up there, a glowing river of light cutting the sky in half, bright enough to cast shadows even in the middle of the night. Something like a third of people alive right now have never properly seen it. The lights we built to feel safe quietly deleted the most spectacular thing our ancestors looked at every night. And it gets weirder, because even the North Star wasn't the North Star. Earth wobbles slowly, like a spinning top that's slightly off balance, and one full wobble takes about 26,000 years. That wobble changes which star sits over the pole, so back in the last ice age, the star at the top of the sky wasn't Polaris. It was Vega, the fifth brightest star in the whole sky, just parked at the pole like it owned the place. Different stars, a different north, and this is just the start of the things we never got to see. Okay, now look down. For a massive chunk of human history, the planet was deep in an ice age, and the big freeze peaked around 20,000 years ago. The phrase ice age sounds kind of cozy until you picture what it actually meant. It meant walls of ice, sheets a mile or two thick, sitting right on top of where cities are now. Stand where Chicago is today, or Edinburgh, or Stockholm 20,000 years ago, and there's a cliff of ice over your head taller than anything humans have ever built, even today. All that ice came from the ocean. So much water got locked up on land that the seas dropped by about 400 feet. Every coastline you know, every beach, every harbor, the whole outline of every continent was different. Coastlines sat further out and much lower, which meant continents were way bigger than what we see today, and that did something genuinely unhinged to the map. You could walk from Asia to America, from Russia to Alaska, on dry land with no boat, across a wide grassy plain we call Beringia. The first people to reach the Americas didn't sail there. They walked into an empty continent through the cold, following the food. These ancient coastlines are sitting underwater right now. Hold that thought, because we'll get back to it later. Now fill that frozen world with giants, because it was packed with them back then. There were mammoths, obviously, elephant-sized and wrapped in fur, moving across the tundra in herds. There were woolly rhinos and cave lions, like twice the size of today's lions, hunting in the snow. There were ground sloths the size of cars, rearing up to pull branches down. And then my personal favorite, the Irish elk, a deer with antlers 12 feet across, wider than your garage, just walking around with all that on its head like it's a totally normal amount of antler. And this isn't some fantasy age a million years before us. Humans lived alongside all of it. They hunted it, painted it on cave walls by firelight, and those paintings are still there today. But here's the one that'll genuinely break your brain. We file mammoths away as ancient history, the same mental drawer as the dinosaurs. That's not even close to right. A small herd of them survived on Wrangel Island, a lonely speck up in the Arctic Ocean, until about 4,000 years ago. So let me put that on a human timeline. The Egyptians built the Great Pyramid of Giza, and then more than 500 years after it was finished, there were still mammoths walking around on Earth. Modern humans and the mammoths basically missed each other by a hair. You're handling the cold pretty well, so let's flip it and go to the desert. Picture the Sahara. It's the biggest hot desert on the planet, nearly the size of the United States, the most nothing place your brain can summon, just sand to the horizon. But just 6,000 years ago, it was green, and not just a bit green, but full-on lush. There were grasslands and rivers and actual lakes with hippos wallowing in them, plus crocodiles and giraffes and whole herds of animals, and people living the good life right in the middle of what's now pure death by sand. Scientists call it the African Humid period, and it didn't end all that long ago. And the proof is the best part. Deep in the Sahara, in a spot so dry and empty it could pass for Mars, there's a cave. On the walls of that cave, ancient people painted pictures of themselves swimming, little figures with their arms out, mid-stroke, right in the middle of the driest place on Earth. It's literally called the Cave of Swimmers. People stood where there's now nothing but sand for 100 miles, and they painted the lake they used to splash around in. The lake dried up thousands of years ago, but the painting of it is still right there on the wall. Remember those drowned coastlines I told you to hold on to? Here's one with a name. Stand on the east coast of Britain about 8,000 years ago, and you wouldn't see the sea at all. You'd just see land. You could walk from England all the way to the Netherlands, across a stretch of hills and rivers and forest we now call Doggerland. People lived there and hunted there, and it was some of the richest ground in Europe. It's now sitting at the bottom of the North Sea. Fishing boats still drag up the bones of its animals, and the odd, ancient tool from the seabed. And the way it died is the part that'll stick with you. The seas had been creeping up for centuries, quietly nibbling at the edges. Then, around 8,000 years ago, a slab of seabed off Norway the size of Scotland let go all at once and threw a tsunami straight across whatever was left. The last of Doggerland went under, and it basically never came back. A whole country full of people, just gone, and not in some legend either, but in the actual North Sea. You've probably flown over it. Okay, take a deep breath, because this last one quietly rearranges everything that came before it. Everything I've described so far, you've been picturing it with people in it, and not just any people, but our people, humans, us. But here's the thing nobody really tells you. For almost all of human story, we were not the only kind of human. We lived side by side with others, the Neanderthals, who were not grunting cavemen but actual people that made tools and art and buried their dead on purpose, spread right across Europe and Asia. There were the Denisovans, a whole separate kind of human we only know about because someone pulled DNA out of a single finger bone in a Siberian cave back in 2010. And on one Indonesian island lived the hobbits, a species called Homo floresiensis, real people who stood about 1 meter tall. They weren't a fairy tale, they were a real species of tiny human. For hundreds of thousands of years, if you walked far enough, you'd run into another kind of human, someone who could build a fire and meet your eyes, but wasn't quite exactly like you. One by one, the lights started going out. The hobbits disappeared around 50,000 years ago, the Neanderthals around 40,000, and the Denisovans not long after that, until, for the first time in the entire history of life on this planet, there was exactly one kind of human left. Just us. On our own. We didn't win some big war. We just outlasted everybody, and now we're rattling around this giant house alone, the only branch of the family with the lights still on. And it happened so recently it barely registers as history, just a few tens of thousands of years ago on a planet that's been spinning for billions. There's one last twist, though, because they didn't fully leave. When the Neanderthals faded, they faded into us, and almost everyone alive today carries a % or 2 of Neanderthal DNA. Some people in the Pacific carry 4, 5, even 6% Denisovan DNA. So the other humans aren't really gone. There are a few lines of old code still quietly running inside you. Everything we discussed, the impossible sky, the giants, the green desert, the other kinds of people sharing the land with us, all peaked around 20,000 years ago. And the last embers of it, the final mammoths, the last green Sahara, the last of the other human species, only flickered out a few thousand years back. Either way, you missed the greatest era this planet has ever had by a rounding error. You weren't born too late to explore the world. You were born just late enough to inherit the empty one.